So, want to warm you up with some questions, because hopefully this will be a highly interactive, discursive type session. If it just ends up with us talking amongst ourselves at the front and you staring at a bunch of PowerPoints, then I don't think we'll get everything we want to out of the morning. So, first question for you. Hands up, who knows what configure is? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you're going to learn a lot. So configure is a worm. It's a self-replicating computer program. The configure worm was the largest ever, I think, still to date, outbreak of a worm that infected millions upon millions and millions of computer systems back in 2008 and caused an awful lot of economic damage to an awful lot of organizations. Next question, who knows what heartbleed is? Okay, so more people figured that one out. All right, anybody want to try and tell me what the answer to that one is in their own words? Any brave? Go on.
It's an encryption leak, basically, in web server.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to lead on to a couple of other things. Who here is responsible for security in some way at their organization? Okay, all right. Who is accountable for security at their organization, ultimately? Okay, all right. Who is consulted on security? Okay. Who is informed on security? Right. Who hasn't put their hand up? Doug. All right, so we've got a few things we want to go through. We want to try and give you a flyby of a bunch of conversations that have been going on amongst a group of us over the last probably 7 or 8 months, I should think it is now. In a way, Peter here was probably the person that actually started this, because a few of us started with a little informal lunch group in the UK, and we decided to have a phone call, and Peter came in on that phone call, and as you will see from his slides later on, basically said, help, and that's what probably triggered an awful lot of the conversations that have been going on ever since. We did a talk a bit like this at the STM Innovation Seminar last December, and I know a couple of you that were in the room saw that, so be quiet, okay, because there's some things that are coming that I don't want you to give away. I'm going to do a bit of scene setting, then I'm going to hand over to Christian over there, who's going to take you on a guided tour through the wonderful world of all the different types of cybersecurity threat. Peter's going to talk about what shall we call it? Let's call it the Elsevier experience. And then Rick, thank you, representing the librarian, is going to give us that massively important perspective as well. So, yeah, no talk on cybersecurity is complete without an XKCD cartoon, and there you are. That's it. It's great. Everybody sanitizes their tables. No, we've never released anything to live and forgotten to do that. So yeah, an informal group. One of the things I want to say, if any of you are interested in joining the club, right, please come and see us at the end of this, because I think our feeling is, of those of us that have been talking, and there's a whole bunch of people back in Europe who are hopefully watching on Twitter, that this stuff is generally important and we need to do something about it, but quite what it is that we need to do is still to be determined at the end of the day. And let's, sorry, that's my very poor Canadian accent joke. I do apologise. Okay, right. So for those of you with your mobile devices, if you take a look at the Wi-Fi setting right now, would someone like to tell me what they're connected to? Yeah. What are you connected to, Richard?
An open Wi-Fi network.
You are indeed connected to an open Wi-Fi network. And what is it called?
Is the name important?
It might be called Western Meeting Room. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You really sure it's the conference Wi-Fi? So I didn't do that here because it might be slightly illegal in this country and I didn't really want to get arrested. But previously in London, I decided to rename my phone as BT Open Zone, which is the Wi-Fi setting for a popular and very well-loved ISP provider in the UK. That's a joke for those of you not in the UK. And then I wandered around the conference for a little while to see how many people I could hoover up. And I got 2 people in about 90 seconds. And the important thing about this is that because they're now connected to me and not connected to the thing that they thought they were connected to, I can do all kinds of fun and interesting things. And one of those things is this. We're very lucky at the IET. We have a guy who's really hot on this stuff. We sent him on an ethical hacking course, amongst other things, so that he could help us do better in our coding and our development work. So basically, we set him at our stuff, and he tries to break it. So what I'm about to show you now is about 4 minutes worth of how to exploit a vulnerability. So if I've got your device, because you're connected to me, and I'm seeing everything that you can do, this is the kind of thing that can happen next. This is in real time, there are no edits. Hopefully we've got sound.
I'm just going to demonstrate to you a vulnerability in Java 1.7 update 10. Here I'm using Backtrack version 5 just to load the Metasploit console. As you can see on screen, you only require a couple of lines of command to actually start this attack, and we're just setting the exploits up now. Once finished configuring this setup, the server starts a web server on port 8080, and we're going to inject this URL into a rogue email. Okay, I'd like to now introduce you to somebody called Terry Test. He's a fine young individual who has a Yahoo Mail email account. He's going about his daily business, logging into his email account as everybody else does. And very successful. Oh, he's received a fresh email though. That appears to be a bounce back message from my message I sent to Amazon earlier regarding the status of my order. Let's just click here to view the contents of the email. Now if you look over on the right hand side here on the actual server, we can see the request is being handled for the jar package. That is actually the payload now being injected. Back to the client on the left here, nothing's happened. We now list the sessions. I now have a session open in the back end. Let's go back to the client, and I didn't like that, so actually I'm going to go ahead and delete that email. As far as I'm concerned, I'm safe. I've logged out of my email and I've gone off to work now and left my computer switched on. On the server here, all I have to do is initially start some commands, which probably would be the first one you would type. That sniffs the keystrokes. Anything now typed on the client's computer is being dumped to a temporary file. I now have access to that, but I'm going to leave that running just as a little tiny background task. If I type the word shell, I now have a full command prompt on that machine. Again, you see nothing on the left hand side of my screen here. The client is unaware what is going on. I can now dir on the desktop, and I can actually see the URL file that I downloaded, and I can go ahead and delete that. Just to protect myself, just in case. And you can see on my left hand side of the screen it's disappeared now. And actually, again, the client may not have noticed that, and I have complete control of the machine. So the other thing I'd like to show you is if we come back out of that and the end user comes back to his machine, he's got a lovely little password safe here. He's going to open his password safe, and I've opened my password safe, and I now have my banking website's password for PayPal and my email Yahoo Mail password in there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to log back into our email, because that's what exactly we want to do. We're going to log in again. No fresh emails, that's a shame. Nobody likes me today. Let's look at the right hand side here, and all you have to do now is dump the key scan results. And you can see here, I now have a password. The first thing I typed in would have been the password for my password safe. So I now have the password to his password safe. You can see the character return. I loaded up the browser, went to Yahoo Mail. I then logged in with Mr. Terry Test, and that is my password. I love my job. That is Terry Test password. I will now go in and change his Yahoo Mail account password, and that means that he's going to be locked out of his Yahoo Mail account, and I have complete access. I hope that's very good, and I hope you've enjoyed watching. Some pieces of advice to follow in the presentation. Thank you very much. Finally, just to close the shell, I've closed the shell down now, and again, the client on the left-hand side here hasn't got a clue. He just has not got a clue that has just happened. Thank you very much.
And things like that lead to things like this. If some of you have noticed, LinkedIn just had a public release of their data breach from 2012, which they kept very quiet. Who got an email from LinkedIn telling them they needed to do something about their password? Yeah, 3 years later. Okay. And that, by the way, is an incredibly serious breach, because the data that's associated with that release of passwords makes it much, much easier for better password cracking strategies to be deployed. Okay, so this stuff is very serious. These are absolutely frightening numbers, and they cost a lot of money. At the bottom there, there's another simply marvellous UK internet service provider called Talktalk that everybody loves very, very much in the UK. I jest. It's cost them a 30% drop in profits from their password breach of last year at the end of the day. So there's real economic cost to this. The VTech breach right at the top is absolutely horrifying, because that is pictures of children with their names and geolocations of where they live. Every now and then you get people say, it's all right, I'm on an Apple, I don't have to worry about it. Who's got a Macintosh? Yeah. Oh, look at that. Actually, the lesson here is there's no such thing as a system that doesn't have vulnerabilities. It's a feature of life. We've got to live with it at the end of the day, and that means we need to think about our behavior and what we do and what our attitudes are from a business perspective to make sure that we are on top of these things. Changing channels a little bit. Here's some data I've been allowed to make public from my organisation, the Institution for Engineering and Technology. So when I started at the organisation, security was in part of the job description, and they said, so you need to pay a lot of attention to security. I went, oh yes, absolutely, I'll pay lots of attention to security. And really I didn't have to worry about it. I started in August 2013, and if you look at the red line, I didn't have to really worry about being responsible for security actually meant until July of 2014, when we had what can only be described as an interesting month. What you're looking at here is data on attacks. So this is people trying to break into the IET systems and infrastructure. Now this stuff goes on all the time, okay? So the data you're seeing here is not the background noise. It's the stuff that rises above that standard background noise. It's the stuff when our systems turn around and say, actually, someone's having a real go at you, you need to go and take a look at this and find out what is going on. And if you look at this data, obviously we had a peak in that July, and then it went quiet again. And then a year later in 2015, the rate of attacks that we were having to look at and investigate started to rise, and it's basically been on an upward trajectory ever since. So this is data all the way up until the end of May. We have someone that looks at this stuff. We go and have checks as to what's going on, so that takes real time and effort to make sure. Obviously, we're a member organisation. We have 175,000 members, so the consequences of a data breach for us as a charity are incredibly serious. What I would like to know, and one of the things it would be great to get some discussion about, is I've no idea what the context of this data looks like in the wider picture of the organisational world that we live in. Okay, I don't know whether the IET is being particularly singled out. I don't know actually whether we're having it easier or not. Are we getting the same kinds of attacks, or is this just opportunistic stuff? I just don't know. Where do they come from? Hard to say how informative it is. They come from the usual places, okay, so China and Russia. What we do see is a lot of places that look like botnet activity at the end of the day, where we're seeing odd attacks coming from specific PCs with all the hallmarks of having been compromised. And so, you know, Terry Test there got his machine compromised. He has no idea what it's being used for, but he leaves it on, and so it's up to all kinds of stuff in the background, and he probably never has any clue that it's being used in that way. I also want to give you two particular case studies, and again, I've been allowed to talk about these. So the first one, in which the attackers used LinkedIn, so they didn't use the passwords, okay? What happened was we had, if you like, a pre-shock where we had some activity the week before the main attack happened. And someone set up a probe to take a look at how our systems were set up, right? And then they went away. And then a week later, we had a much larger attack, and the alerting systems flagged it up to us, and we got a payload of the data that came in as to what they were doing, and it was a brute force attack on the login system. So usernames and passwords. Okay, so we go and look at the usernames and passwords that are coming in to see if we could figure out what's going on, and we have a bit of a shock because there are names in there that we recognize. And we're thinking, how do they get hold of that? Well, it turns out that our best guess and our best information is that what they'd actually done was they'd gone to LinkedIn, okay? They'd used LinkedIn as a search engine for people that could reasonably be associated with the Institute for Engineering and Technology. They'd taken those names, and then they'd used those names and the other ancillary data to put a set of plausible usernames together and also a set of plausible passwords. And so this was a highly directed attack directly at the IET, okay? And we had to do quite a lot of work. The other one in which they used a botnet is the one in which they were, to use a technical term, a right bunch of sneaky bastards. So this one ran for 72 hours before we saw it, which gave us some serious pause, actually. Our alert systems didn't pick it up, and when they did pick it up, we actually had to do, well, it was a very interesting week at work. We had to send around a whole set of messages that said, right, we're logging everybody out of their accounts with immediate effect, so that's all potentially 170,000 members of the organisation suddenly not having access to their systems because we're turning off the login system because we didn't know whether we had been breached. And what they'd done was they'd hired a botnet, okay, so we had 250 separate machines being used, and they did a very slow attack. So they try a username and password combination. Then they would change to another machine on a different IP and try another username and password combination, and they did it slowly. Okay, so they were leaving 2 or 3 minutes between the attacks, but it was happening from multiple directions at the same time. So multiple loops of attacks coming in, all right, all trying to evade our detection systems. And that caused an awful lot of work for us at the end of the day. Again, we are lucky they did not get in. We did discover, trust you all, please don't tweet this. We did discover that some people had used their passwords as their usernames. I'm not going to comment on just how incredibly stupid that is as a thing to do. And luckily they were very old accounts, and we believe they are dormant accounts, but we actually had to go and try and find out whether there were people actually on the other end of those accounts and let them know. So there was a huge amount of work that went into this, and a huge amount of work of trying to figure out how to detect this kind of attack in future and put heuristics in place to stop it happening. So that's some of our experience, and as I say, you know, I don't know the extent to which we might be singled out. We are an organisation that does things in the world of engineering. We're an organisation that actually is doing some thought leadership in the world of cybersecurity. Obviously, as the Institution of Engineering, we have some interesting and very senior members of the engineering community, the kind of people that sit in submarines and go underwater for 6 months to a year at a time, those kinds of people. So we have some interesting characters that people might be interested in finding more information out about, okay? But it strikes me that this is really serious stuff. And here we are, a bunch of IT folk working for the institution, sitting there thinking this is fairly asymmetric as a contest at the end of the day. So that's my experience and our experience. Christian is going to take you a little